What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the markets thus far and what you should be watching for as time progresses, and how things are looking going into the month of January, in my opinion. Before I break anything down, all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the charts. Tesla is currently up about $1.40 right now in the pre-market, trying to hold up. But overall, guys, we're just barely holding the support at the 50 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. So we're going to be watching this very, very carefully just to see how things go. But I want to break down more details about it in just a couple of minutes. Now, I want to be honest with everyone. When it comes to my view of the markets, I think that SPY, the QQQ, Nvidia, and these other tickers are going to see a pullback in January. Right? I think that there's a very good chance of that happening looking at the technicals and what I'm about to show you. But Tesla does not have to follow the crowd. Tesla could run on its own if we get strong deliveries. And the biggest determiner of how Tesla moves, at least going for the next 2 weeks, is going to be deliveries. So watch that very carefully. I'll be breaking this down over the next couple of minutes. For today, guys, watch for some volatility at 9:45 a.m. We have the Chicago PMI report coming out. I want this to be between 50 and 51. Watch it very carefully. Watch for volatility, and we'll see how it goes. For the options chain, we have 1.6 plus million SPY puts expiring with a 471 max pain and 1.96 puts to call ratio. So watch that very carefully. And we watch to see how this looks and watch to see how this affects the markets. Right now, I just want to note that with the majority positions being in puts, it is very possible the market makers try to hold the market up just for a bit. But even if they do, I still think that there's going to be a pullback in January, and I don't think that this is going to stop it. I think the market's due for that. Once I show you guys more tickers and more indicators, you'll see more proof of why I'm saying that. But going into the option chain, let me just double check that this is the right date. So for the option chain for today, there's actually not much going on. We are seeing some interest at the 476 strike, but there's higher volume at 475. That suggests that the market makers would be fine if they just hold the market barely up at where we are. They don't have to pump it like it's extremely hard for close. And then what else is interesting to me is that when you look at the put side, I'm seeing, let me just double check this. There's quite an increase at the 475 puts. Volume is kind of high right there. So it's a little bit interesting how we're seeing a lot of puts being bought again. So we'll see how this goes. Is this going to lead to a short squeeze or not? I'm not thinking that there's going to be a massive short squeeze, but I do believe that regardless of what happens, a January pullback is still imminent. And I'm saying this also because of the fear and greed index. It's at extreme greed. It's been there for weeks. So I'm going to be watching this very, very carefully. Other indicators are at their extremes from puts and call positioning. Market is overbought. When people are too greedy, that's when things can start to turn. So just be careful. SPY is only within, or the S&P 500 is within 0.28% from all-time highs. That's once again very interesting. We could tag all-time highs before coming back down. It's always a possibility. On top of all of this, there's some news that came out about how these large companies have been losing some, as Americans lost their spending power in the past. The pandemic led to lots of big spending, and then this led to high inflation. And then ultimately, with the prices cooling, this is actually having a negative effect for some companies, which are starting to cut their sales forecasts because we saw extreme growth, which could be slowing down. And this is why we're starting to see cost-cutting strategies being implemented by different companies out there. There's also some news coming out about how there's cheap money for tech startups. But things are changing as well as we're starting to see more bankruptcies. So just be a little careful with these high interest rates. And besides that, there's nothing else that's too crazy. The notorious 737 MAX plane may have another problem for Boeing. They're basically saying that they need to inspect aircrafts for possible loose bolts just to be safe in the rudder control system. So that's going to be very important. It's for the rudder control system. That's pretty much it for Boeing, but there's something else that's too crazy on the news. Today is the last trading day of the year. For Tesla, I didn't see anything too crazy as of right now. There's some news about how a Tesla Cybertruck was spotted charging a Rivian R1T. Very interesting stuff. That's something cool about the Cybertrucks that could be used as They're like portable chargers that just move around, so it's pretty cool. And then on top of that, there's some news coming out that BYD is on the verge of surpassing Tesla. Once again, guys, I don't really care too much about BYD being able to do it. They're likely going to be able to, which is fine. But don't forget that Tesla is still a great company. They're still very strong. We don't have to compare them to every single company out there. And Tesla is so much more than just an EV company. So look at their sales. You can see how they're competing. But Tesla, in my opinion, still has so much potential. Don't let this stop you from seeing it. Don't let this change your view. So what do I see for the market? Now it's time for me to talk about this. On the 4 hour time frame, Tesla's just barely holding the 50 EMA. So you want to see if Tesla could hold this 253 zone. If we hold this, there's going to be potential for it to try to push up to 256.8 and then just kind of fluctuate. If it breaks below this, and we see 252 being tested again, we fail to break above this, Tesla's going to turn bearish. We're going to see a bigger drop. So that's going to be very critical for support. It's very close to this 252 to 253 range. If we lose that, Tesla's going to be sinking. That's going to be our critical support, by the way. So let me actually change this color. Basically, it's this one right here. I'm going to make this yellow and then change this back to like white. We want to be holding this support right here. This is going to be very critical for Tesla. We hold above 252 to 253. That's our 50 EMA. If we lose this yellow support, Tesla's going to be sinking for 250 and possibly even 247 and turn more bearish. If we manage to hold above it, we're going to fluctuate in the 250s, kind of trade sideways, and that's going to be very probable, at least for the time being. If we manage to hold above 254, however, there could be an attempt for 256 again at the 20 EMA as we try to hold up. But if anything, Tesla is just kind of flat right now, so we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. If we break 256, our next resistance is 258 and 260. Looks like Tesla could attempt to push up when we open, but we're going to be watching to see if we get this rejection again and how we end up holding above our 50 EMA. It is the last day of the trading year, so it could be a little bit harder to predict. But if anything, guys, it doesn't really scare me what Tesla does. Even if Tesla does sell off a little bit, that's completely fine because what's going to determine which way Tesla moves is going to be deliveries coming out in just a couple of days going into next year. Deliveries will determine if Tesla gets a big pump or not. So watch that very, very carefully. Even if Tesla cools off a bit, it could still pump very hard early next year. It could even drop really hard depending on deliveries, so it's going to be fine nonetheless. But despite what Tesla's doing, so just to clarify, guys, I think that for January, Tesla's going to be determined heavily by its deliveries. Deliveries are going to be key for it, but my view is different for SPY and the broader markets. For SPY, however, we have a rising wedge and we're starting to break out of it. I think that it is possible, for them to grab liquidity up here again, the 477 area. I think that 478 to 480 could be tested, but I think it's a little bit less likely. But I think that what's going to ultimately happen is a January pullback. I think the market's going to pull back in January. My strategy was to just grab, a short position, but I'm gonna hold it much longer out, so like a February expiration short position, and then if it pumps a little bit more, I'll just dollar cost average. I'm gonna like start off with a small position and build it up. That's like what my strategy is. You don't have to copy me, not financial advice, of course. But watch 476 as support, 475, 474, 473.8, then 472. For resistance, watch 477.5, 478, and then 480. What do I think is going to happen? We could hold it for one more day, but ultimately it doesn't matter because I think that the market's going to sell off. Even if they do try to grab liquidity, the reason I'm saying there's a sell off is because the market has been at extremes for too long. They're waiting for the year to end clearly. We're getting some indicators suggesting a pullback is coming. We have a triple bearish divergence on the 4 hour time frame. This time I think it might play out because these weren't working for some time, but the market is due for that pullback. The fear and greed index also suggests that the pullback is coming, looking at how greedy the market is. So I think even if we hold up for one more day in January, there's going to be a pullback. It may take 1 week into January. It may not happen immediately, but ultimately sometime in January there's going to be a pullback, which is why I'm going to be taking non-financial advice, but February puts are what I'm basically eyeing. So I see a pullback coming. Watch 476 as support. If this fails in the future, we're going to start sinking much lower. For today, we could hold up, could grab liquidity up here and just trade sideways in the range that we're in right here. But then we might break down later on in January. I just want to warn you about that. I still anticipate that, and I just want to warn you as fast as possible. QQQ is looking kind of weak. We're going to be watching to see if this thing can hover around the 412s. Watch 412 as resistance, 413 as well. Watch support around this 410 area. Then we have 409 and 408. We could push, kind of like shuffle a little bit today, trade sideways, and then going into January, I wouldn't be surprised if we come down to start filling these gaps at 408 or even lower levels. So I anticipate downside for the QQQ going into January. It may take 1 to 2 weeks into January for the pullback to start, but I think it's going to come. And I think that that's going to be the much bigger move than what we see. I think the upside is limited. I think the bigger move is going to be to the downside for a very healthy pullback. Watch the supports I just called out, just to be safe. Nvidia is looking kind of strong right now. It's still holding up nicely in this rising wedge. Could this thing push up for 498 to 500? It sure can. Could push up even more. But ultimately, I think that this move is going to lead to a sell-off as we have a rising wedge that's continuing to develop, especially going into next year, guys. I would be a little bit more careful with Nvidia. Could this thing push up more? Yes, it can. We could be backtesting 498 to 500, but I think the market's due for a pullback. I think that we might try to grab liquidity where these wicks are again before this thing starts to pull back. So 498 to 500 could be tested. Could even go a little higher, but I think that Nvidia will sell off later on. So watch support very carefully. Support's at 495 right now, 492, 490, and 488. Resistance at 498, 500, and then we have like 504 above that. Could push up a little bit more. Then we're going to look for a sell-off as time goes on. So watch that very, very carefully. As far as Apple goes, Apple's trying to break out of this falling wedge, but it is still stuck between supply and demand. Apple is very simple. We have 193.5 as support. We also have 194.4 as resistance. We're kind of stuck between these two yellow lines. If we break 194.4, we'll look for a push for 195 plus. If we fail to break that, we're just stuck. We might just fluctuate like this. And if we lose 193.5, watch it come down to 192.5. In my opinion, it's kind of stuck, so it might just trade sideways for now, but we'll be watching to see which way it breaks for there to be a bigger move. All right, guys, so just to clarify, in January, I anticipate a pullback for the broader markets, for SPY, the QQQ, and etc. But Tesla could outperform the market and still hold up if we get strong deliveries. That does not mean Tesla has to follow the trend. It's going to depend on deliveries. That's going to determine how Tesla does in January. So watch that very, very carefully. For today, Tesla's trying to hold above this 252 to 253 area. That's between our 50 EMA and the support right over here. If we lose this, I would turn more bearish. If we manage to hold above this, we could just kind of shuffle in the 250s for some time and trade sideways. That's very probable for today. Look for a little pop when we open. We tend to push when we open and watch it come down as time goes on and fluctuate. That is likely going to be the case. And then we'll be watching to see how it's affected by deliveries. So watch supply and demand. Today's the last trading day of the year. I wish the best for everyone. So please take care, guys. And I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Tesla to the moon, because the long term is still very bright alongside for the whole market. And peace out.